But here we are. There's 8 of us. That's a good enough time for discussion. So a couple of things that were mentioned before everyone arrived. One was, oh, here's Norman. Come on, Norman, get on. There you go. A couple of things were mentioned before we all started. That one was that someone wasn't familiar with mirror neurons, and I have to admit I wasn't familiar with them either. And the other one was that compassion can hurt, physically hurt, being compassionate. And that was an interesting observation. But the main question is how do we, as humanists, reconcile, since we don't have any God or anything, reconcile the rationale for having compassion and empathy? And
Well,
what I thought,
just make a quick observation, none of the gods of any of the holy writs with which I'm familiar, which admittedly is not all of them, but probably 20, the deities in those holy writs are not exactly compassionate or empathetic. So probably we're better off not trying to directly or indirectly follow the lead of somebody that drowns the entire population of the earth because they're peaked. Right?
well, I would say the exception would be those who consider the Buddha a god rather than just a man.
Yeah. Well, I think the justification for compassion and ethics and morals and even empathy is evolutionary necessity. I think we're observing that with our own species, that with the lack of all of those things, we're going to go extinct. And it's a direct causal link between lack of empathy and compassion and our extinction. So why do we need more than that?
Especially when the guys with the most power have got really big tools to help that extinction come about.
And totally are lacking in sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Our dear leader in Washington, D.C. certainly seems to be lacking in empathy and compassion.
Oh, no, he's got he's got lots of empathy. He understands how people work in a limited way. He has zero compassion.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say that not only are empathy and compassion not valued, but it almost seems like sociopathy is valued right now in the U.S. government. The more sociopathic you are, the better.
You may have a point.
Survival of the craziest.
Yeah,
So-
those who survive in government are not compassionate, that's for sure.
So was anyone surprised to find the neuroscience so compelling in our evolutionary history?
Yeah. I was amazed.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
the
Fred.
mirror.
Go ahead, Fred, and then I'll come back to you, Keaton.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was amazed. As somebody said at the outset before we got going, I tended to think of compassion as sentiment, as opposed to being wired in. And that was interesting. And it gives a new light on it. And I'm wondering, given that, then what's the implication of it for us? If we think this is the way things fundamentally are, so what?
I think
Okay, Keaton.
things that is missing in all the physiology is that, first off, it's not conclusive yet. It's not really all wired together. But more importantly, I think it's important that we distinguish the physiological ability to feel compassion with what compassion is. Those are two different things. And my point here is that, just for one example, what is called compassion in the East is not the same thing as compassion in the West. The golden rule in the West is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The golden rule in the East is do unto others as they would have done unto themselves, which is a completely different approach to compassion. In other words, you don't see any Buddhists out proselytizing for Buddhism, but you see a lot of Christians out proselytizing for Christianity. And the reason for that is that compassion in the East is a passive, or not passive, a non-combative sport, whereas in the West, it tends to be more confrontational. I know what's right for you, and so I'm going to help you, versus let me find out what you need and let me help you. Two completely different meanings of compassion.
Eaton, go ahead.
Yeah, so the mirror neurons, apparently it's not just about feelings leading to compassion. It also showed that if you put your hand in the fire, you'd suffer pain, and people observing you would feel the pain and understand that fire hurts. And the way that discoveries spread through these mirror neurons was quite interesting. It was about 100,000 years ago, they said, that, suddenly the discovery of fire and other things, the use of tools, spread very quickly across humanity. Because if you saw somebody use a flint stone to start a fire, you'd get the idea yourself. You'd say, wow, that's cool. He got a real bump. And I felt it. I saw it. You feel good about it. You started a fire. Yes, that's my point.
I would object to the science of that, because there is no evidence of what was or was not happening 300,000 years ago with our ancestors. We don't know whether there was transmission of information in this way. We do know there was once tools that last, like stone weapons and implements, but we don't know. We have no evidence one way or the other of what was happening before that.
Except that,
I'm just repeating what I read.
yeah.
Well,
except
and yeah, I'm just saying is there is no evidence, because it doesn't.
Go ahead.
I think what they sort of gave as evidence was that this compassion thing, if it spread, might be a possible explanation for the rapidness of some of these evolutionary traits, like, well, the rapidness of fire, the use of fire spreading so rapidly. They were giving that as a possible explanation.
Yeah.
Because it happened so quickly, apparently. What other explanation do we have for it?
Right, exactly. That's good evidence that whatever these neurons are doing is great for learning and transmitting cultural skills, but I don't think it is indicative of the birth of compassion, which, as far as I can see, exists in animals that have been around much longer than we have. So I'm just saying I don't see the connection yet scientifically.
Okay, since there's a silence, I'll talk about myself for a moment. No, I was diagnosed with mild autism, Asperger's, long ago. And I realize, reading, that I do lack empathy. I see people suffering and do not react the way apparently compassionate people do. What I do is I imitate. If everybody's grieving at a wake, I'm going to, act that way too. It's the sensible thing to do. You don't want to be ostracized because you're the only guy in the room that's laughing and having a great time. All right, enough said.
Wonderful. Folks, I think a round of applause for one of the best insightful comments of all the sessions I've ever attended here. Thank you, Keaton.
So if we're imitating those around us and we get that from them, maybe that's how women became possibly more compassionate than men, because in the old days, we'd be sitting around hunting and gathering days. You're gathering, you're cooking, you're, making leather, you're, taking care of the kids, the old people, while the hunters are off or having their guado or whatever you'd call it in that country. And so they're learning to be one way and the women are learning to be another way. And then it just gets inborn. I don't know. In clubs that I belong to. And so, go ahead.
Joanne Halifax quite rightly brings up the goddess Guan Yin, but to make the point you're making that women are naturally more compassionate than men, I've been following her since I was about 8 years old, and she's a wonderful goddess, lots going for her. But I would like to make a modest suggestion that men are desensitized by our culture to being compassionate, that when we're born, men and women have the same capability of compassion, but our culture de-compassions males. So
Yep.
I think we can recondition males back to being real human beings, i.e. more like women, with a little bit of effort.
Well, and also we know that compassion is something that is learned. We may start with a minimal amount, but we can learn. And women, as you would describe in those situations, are going to learn more and more compassion.
Because it's not just feeling, it's doing. You're with the babies, you're with somebody that's gotten hurt. You learn how to do those things, and then you get good at it, and then you continue. And yeah, I believe that it's learned also and developed over time.
And thank goodness for that.
Interested in discussions of the origin of the bonobos. I assume everybody knows what bonobos are. They're a kind of chimpanzee, but are quite different from us, the third chimpanzee, or the normal ones, in that they get along very well. Ordinary chimps go on wars and fight off other chimpanzees for territory. The bonobos don't. The bonobos, if there's any problem in their group, they get rid of the problem by sex. They don't fight, they have sex. And that's the way they resolve all of their issues. And the question is, how did bonobos rise to be different from the other chimpanzees? And apparently at one time, maybe it was in the Congo, a group of chimpanzees got separated from the others by a river, and the people who were separated then developed differently than the others. Why did they develop differently? There was a huge proportion of females in that group. So all of the people over time developed based on there being so many women around and running things, and became very, very, very much nicer than normal chimpanzees or like Homo sapiens are.
Works for me.
And they may have been killed more, because I lived in the Amazon for a while, and a lot of the men get killed because when they go out hunting, it's a dangerous thing. And so there's often in certain tribes, or I guess animals, species that hunt in the wild, that the male of the species dies off. And so there's more females in the safer areas doing softer things together.
A couple points that I want to comment on James' point way back when. that the difference between West and East may be the difference between focusing on the individual versus the duality in the East. And the second one is what is the role of dopamine and I forget the actual name of the love hormone.
Serotonin,
No,
dopamine, serotonin.
dopamine, and it starts with a C. I forget it. But it's associated as the love hormone, makes you feel warm and cuddly and that type of thing. When
Yeah,
you do-
cuddly.
Yeah. Comments?
Well, just on the on the serotonin and other thing, I have read that, for instance, dogs' brains release those same neurotransmitters when they see their owners or their pack mates as humans do, which would tend to make you think that perhaps some of those things are, I mean, they're, the compassion or love or whatever it is more than one species. And so it's not necessarily something that humans stand out on, that maybe we articulate it better or differently.
How far back do you think it goes in the evolutionary path? This idea of compassion. Someone had mentioned that they have noticed it in the primates and lower animals. How far back does it go, do you think?
Eve said, "Hey, Adam, I found this apple and I think you might be hungry too, honey. Here." No, I'm kidding.
Well, they do say that rats lick the wounds of other rats. So it certainly doesn't have to arrive only with primates.
Frank, you've been awful quiet. Got anything to add on to this?
Well, I didn't read the links somewhat quickly last night, so I didn't really develop any philosophical thoughts. But I will say this, since I'm now on air, I found the links very interesting. And of course, from it, I learned the definitions or the differences between compassion, empathy, and altruism. I'd never had those delineated as clearly as they were last night. And I also discovered that I'm a religious humanist. Now, the word humanist from, I guess, earlier in my life seemed to be a dirty word. Well, I suppose amongst the religious community, and I didn't really understand why. Of course, now that I understand more about humanism, I realize it's not a dirty word at all. Anyway, I don't have anything philosophical to contribute to the conversation, but I'm very interested in what I'm hearing, and some of your participants are obviously very knowledgeable, and I'm glad to be on board listening.
If I could mention, one of the things is cross-species compassion. We have heard of instances of porpoises rescuing people who are drowning. So there must be some cross-species compassion for that to happen.
That's a pretty good argument for defining animals based on their sentience, their ability to understand that they exist separately from others and that others exist separately from them. I think you can draw pretty much a straight line in the animal kingdom of going from those animals that have no concept of self and other to us, and also probably whales and dolphins, probably, where compassion has reached a sophistication like a cathedral, whereas in lower species, it's got all the sophistication of a pump tent, but it's still there, still keeps the rain out.
Well, anecdotally, in animals, for instance, dogs, anecdotally, there's been lots of stories about how our companion, our pets, can feel our pain, our sorrow, and our happiness, and seem to respond to it in their own way to try and help and care for us.
Yay!
Here's Norman.
All right. The mystery is solved.
I
As
was
to your
interested-
point, Bob, there's that famous dog in Japan who went to meet his owner every day when the owner was coming back from work, and the owner died at work, and the dog went on going there every day for 10 years until it died. Now, that's gotta, that just impresses the heck out of me.
Fred, you were going to say something?
I saw that statue in Tokyo of the dog Hashiko or something like that, and then they also made a movie of it. Yeah, that is pretty amazing, that dog, but he became very famous.
The thing I was going to say was that I was also impressed in the studies on the ability to train compassion, where it seems that whether you really work at compassion or whether you just meditate normally, it's much of a muchness, but that people who meditate a lot have a much more, I don't know whether it's the kicking up of the neurons or whatever. That seemed to be quite interesting, and it made me think I should have been meditating a lot more than I do.
We
Do
talked,
you
we
feel you
talked-
have a deficiency in compassion? Why would you, you seem to me to be, from what little I've seen of you over the time we're together, to be quite a compassionate person. Why do you need to meditate to get more of it?
Interesting. Thank you for that, but I think I don't know. I think I would like to be more compassionate.
It'll cost you a lot of money.
Well, at this age, I don't need any more money.
Okay.
It'll just go in inheritance anyway.
There was a reference in a few of those articles about the metta meditation or self, taking care of oneself in the compassion or loving oneself or the loving kindness meditations. Any comments on that?
Meditation is inherently selfish, I think. It obviously, from based on all the studies and life experience, is very beneficial. But the ultimate act of achieving oneness in your own brain is the exclusion of everything on the outside. And compassion is about dealing with everything on the outside. So it's an interesting combination where you have a practice, meditation being one of them, that brings you into yourself, and yet the result is it brings you out to help others. I've never quite understood that. Can somebody explain that one?
Well, the loving kindness meditation starts with taking care of yourself, but also extends out and wishes well to others and the whole world.
On an airplane, they say buckle your own seatbelt first before you buckle your kid's seatbelt next to you. You know, you got to take care of yourself first rather than the other. Seems to me like what you just said is don't eat healthy food. You know, if you eat healthy food, you can do a lot more in the world. You know, don't take care of your inner self so that you're at peace, and then you have the ability to go out and do good in the world. I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. It's remarkable that a device, a mental device that brings one into oneself has this exact effect that you're talking about. It so frequently makes one motivated to help others. I haven't quite got the how that works.
And what's wrong with that?
Nothing wrong with it.
But
I don't understand how it works. I mean, it's sort of like an internal combustion car. I know I get in there, I turn the key, and the engine goes, and then I put in the gears and the car goes. But how all that happens, I don't know.
Joyce.
I-
Joyce?
I have a thought on that because how I've seen meditation work is that very often, due to what's going on in life, our thoughts are and our actions are very scattered and very ineffective, and we don't pay attention to other people because our thoughts are so scattered. Meditation allows you to focus, and then once you focus, I think it's easier to see outside yourself. It's almost like cleaning the windshield. Once you've cleaned the windshield, you're more able to see what's outside of you.
I like that.
And just to follow up on that, if indeed we have these mirror neurons, and so if we really are connected, and if meditation gets us more in tune with ourselves, it would get us more in tune with the fact that we are connected. So it seems to me maybe it isn't that much of a puzzle, that the more we know ourselves, the more we know those things about us that mirror others.
That's very encouraging, which means that not everybody who is self-absorbed is selfish. That I wonder how that applies. I really like that. All the line of talk that I've been hearing here is really refreshing. How do we deal with people who are reflective and narcissistic? Is there some interplay here that we're missing?
Well, the narcissistic personality is sometimes talked about as the lack of empathy and the lack of compassion. And there are people that somehow have a depressed, that function is depressed within their mental capacities. And quite frankly, they don't understand it themselves. With the person that I've talked to that says, I do not have that so-called gene, although it's really not a gene. The other thing is going back to an understanding of what's actually happening in the duality aspect, is that it's the difference between someone who is strictly self-reflective on themselves versus someone who is in dialogue with another person. Again, the difference between the Western philosophy and the Eastern philosophy, which I look more as a continual dialogue rather than an introspection. That help at all, James?
Yeah, that's the last 8 minutes of this conversation have cleared away more fog than I've been in San Francisco, cleared away more fog than that. Thank you all.
I read an article by Gabor Mate. I have my notes right here about compassion fatigue, because I'm in the Chalice Circle, and that was one of the articles that was there. And my thing was, how could you ever have compassion fatigue? The more you give and get involved and do things for others, the better you feel. Like it's boundless. It just feels good to do good. And that's where that serotonin or whatever, comes in, and you just think like, wow, I want more of that. And how can I help? How can I serve? And he said that compassion fatigue, because sometimes you do feel like, oh my God. He said it comes in because you have too much outside and you don't have enough empathy and compassion for yourselves. You don't take care of yourself. You don't set boundaries, that you go out to feel good rather than going inside and feeling good. And maybe Fred and different ones of you, Joyce, that, are doing the meditation, you're getting that from the inside more than from the outside.
How I could see compassion fatigue, Susie, for me, the best metaphor was the first time I went to Chichen Itza, probably 30 years ago, and I gave one child a peso coin, and I suddenly had about 150 children on me, grabbing at me, trying to get money. And so that's how I see compassion fatigue, is it's just too much, like, and it goes along something with what you said, is that we can give from others, but if it just feels like there's nothing left of you, then you can't feel compassion, and you instead, as I did in that situation, you grab everything around you and you get out of there. That's how I see compassion fatigue.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be money, though.
Yeah, no, but yeah, that's
No, that's just my metaphor
Yeah,
for
but
it.
yes, and it's good.
exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of like, to
Yeah.
put it into another phrase, it's kind of like you have an input. You have one output that you're going to give out to the world in compassion, but there's too many inputs and it overwhelms the signal. So
Yeah.
all you get is really just noise.
Yeah, he was calling it empathy burnout.
And it causes a system failure within
Yeah.
yourself because there's
You have
just
to-
too much out there and you're overwhelmed by it all.
Yeah, my wife, a nurse, would be in that situation because she's with so many people that are suffering so much. I can't imagine how she controls it.
Frank, go ahead.
Do you think the ability to feel compassion depends on whether you are an introvert or an extrovert?
Those terms are, I think, useful dividing lines in some contexts, but I don't think it has great application to this issue. Maybe I'm wrong, but
How would you see it differing between introverts and extroverts, Frank?
Well, I'm inclined to be a loner. And I don't know really how compassionate I am because I haven't really been tested very much. If I was to create a scale of 1 to 10 to measure compassion, I suppose I'd put myself around 6. But as I say, having not really been tested, I mean, I lost my wife and so on. But other than that, I haven't been put to the test as I see it.
One of the things that helped me when we did our Cultivating Compassion Soul Matters chalice circle is I had to look it up and distinguish between sympathy, empathy, compassion, and pity. And sympathy is simply, I care about your suffering. So it doesn't matter if you're extrovert or introvert. I care about your suffering. Empathy is, I feel your suffering. I feel it. You're crying. I'm crying too. I really feel it deeply. Uh, Pity is more like it just, I see your pain, but you don't do anything about it. Compassion is all of the above, but I want to relieve your suffering and pain. I want to get engaged in the suffering or pain. I want to do something about it to alleviate. And so I would think that a introvert would go for the first 3 that I mentioned, and the extrovert might be better off with the compassion because they know how to go out in and do something about it to help make the problem less bad.
we may have a definitional thing here of what an introvert and an extrovert is. But I think your point you just made is excellent, that something inside you either takes the empathy, the concern, the caring, and redirects it outward. And the question being before us is, do introverts, are they less likely to do that than extroverts? I don't know, the mechanism of introversion, extroversion, I'm not sure that really applies, but there's something, absolutely something that does compel that compassion to come out into the world and do something. And the mechanism for that is fun. It's Joanne Halifax has a very interesting point. Talks about the baseline that a truly compassionate person, when they see somebody suffering, they get very upset, but then they get back. Being upset causes pain and dissonance, and so you want to remove yourself from the situation. That's what happens to most people. Compassionate people, Halifax says, you return to your mental baseline quicker, and so you're able emotionally to stick around and help. And that, I think, has something to do with what you were just saying about getting the compassion out into the world. Fascinating.
The other thing on that is too, is how much of our evolutionary background to be a social animal, to have social contracts, is embedded and imprinted into our psyche. Are we hardwired?
Yeah. And what kind of social animal? Obviously, ants and bees, where social animals don't have compassion, but it's
How do you
the
know?
brainy kind of social, right?
Yeah. But as you were saying, someone was saying the lower animals, lower being not man, have this capacity. And so there is an evolutionary hardwire, I would think, to interaction and compassion.
I think that's pretty well established in the science.
Yeah.
No man is an island. I don't think animals would get by without helping each other either.
No, they all have to have
And-
social contract. Even in the study on primates of the alpha males, there's and most of those studies are obviously male oriented and from their observer standpoint, and don't take into effect the underlying framework from the female of the species aspect. And if they flipped the studies around a little bit, they would see that there's another layer underneath that fosters cooperation and kindness just for existence.
Seems you're getting a bit into nature and nurture also, like what is innate in us when we're born, and then what do our parents and our surroundings help develop in ourselves. If we're born in I don't know, a cartel family here, and you're seeing killings and hearing this stuff, and dad's drinking with his buddies all the time and whatever, how they grow up compared to probably how most of us grew up. What When I taught school, there were Mexicans and non-Mexicans, Anglos in the elementary school on the border in New Mexico. And they all would play together when they were younger, no big deal. And then they get into middle school and high school and they separate, or at least this was decades ago, and they didn't want to be together. They learned to be racist. They learned that one group is us and the other group is them. That's something you learned. So can we learn to be more outgoing and kind and helping others? Or is that something, can we learn to distrust others and fight others and try to destroy the outgroup?
Well, when you talk about nurture, I spent a lot of my school years, starting at the age of 7, in what I would call a British style boarding school. And so in many ways, my experience of family life was pretty limited until I met my wife, and she gave me a family life which a school obviously can't.
Mm.
And a boys' school, a boys' boarding school anyway, is competitive and therefore not given to exhibiting compassion or concern for another.
Competition over compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Gee, sounds like a corporation, which we all know what that leads to. We've been having such a nice, pleasant, and progressive conversation. Can I throw out something that's in the reading right at the very beginning that may get us off in a different direction? It says at the very beginning that humanists affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. My question is, does that apply to child molesters, partner abusers, serial killers, tyrants, and sociopaths? Do they have inherent worth and dignity, those folks? Just a question.
Oh, that is the conundrum, James. That is the conundrum. In not to get theological, but to touch on it a bit. You know, the big question is, if a theology, a humanist theology like the you use, base everything around the concept of love, how can you hate anybody? And that is the conundrum. All these people who are basically evil, can we see the speck of humanity in them?
Right, Bob. That's a fascinating topic, not the one I was trying, maybe not properly articulating. What is the inherent worth, not whether you love them or not whether you throw them into a burning fiery furnace, but is there an inherent worth or dignity in a lifelong serial sociopathic killer? That's just a question. I don't have an answer, but I was hoping you've answered one question I had already. You folks could answer this one.
I have some thoughts about that because, I mean, obviously with Trump, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, but I've also been listening to some podcasts about, you know, this woman who was terribly abused by Epstein and Maxwell, and thinking what worth those people would have. And I think in a situation like that, the most that we can give someone as far as dignity and worth is that whole due process, that they have the right to present their case, and then we as a society have the right to say, we don't want you here with us. And so I think that's how we give them dignity and worth. We give them a chance to present their case in a due process. But that doesn't mean we have to allow someone like that out and about among our children, for instance.
So you're saying that the dignity and worth that we're talking about, that every person has, is something innate within every person, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're allowed to do anything that they want.
That's what my philosophy is, yes.
Okay. I'll have to work more on seeing dignity in Donald Trump, but I'll try.
Well, the other thing, James, is to try and figure out where the commonality is in our humanity. And is there any there that we could latch onto to say, yeah, there is a little bit that makes them human. There is a little bit of dignity within them. But for the life of me, I haven't solved the conundrum either.
Well, I think of
ahead.
people that are imprisoned, say with the death penalty, and during the time that they're in jail, they write a book or, you know, do something beneficial. It happens from time to time. Not always, but occasionally. And then you could say, well, we finally saw what he was worth, that he deserved some dignity because he wrote a book that helped people.
My mom was very religious, Lutheran, and she used to go to Minerva's restaurant every breakfast meeting for decades or whatever, you know, after she retired. And when I go back and visit her in Cleveland, I would sometimes go with her. One time they were talking about forgiveness, and it was right around the time that Jeffrey Dahmer was I guess was right when he was killed in jail or something. And the idea was, did he go to heaven? And everyone at the table said, of course he did. And I'm like, whoa, 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 how can that be? And I'm trying to be careful and not embarrass my mom with this crazy daughter. But the idea was that he had done so many bad things, you know, getting women and having them in places and making lampshades of them, or kneading their bodies and putting their bodies in refrigeration and all this. And he was just a horrible person. But once he got taken to jail, he found Jesus. Well, you know, this was Ohio, so it's not as easy as finding Jesus in a New Mexico jail, but he found Jesus, and then he was proselytizing there. And so, according to Christians, he redeemed himself. And so he would be raised up and up there and, you know, sitting on a cloud somewhere. Hi there, Jeffrey Dahmer, you know, in heaven with our Lord Jesus Christ, because he was forgiven of his sins. And they were saying, remember, it's not through good works that you get to enjoy the realm of our Lord. it is through believing in him and doing what he would have you do, blah, blah, blah. I remember just hearing my mom sort of saying, bite your tongue, young lady. Like, one of those, like, what the fuck?
I would
You're
like
you're
to
talking
introduce
about the
another
difference between
thought.
divine forgiveness and human forgiveness. When God,
Inherent.
when God forgives you, it's because you've pleased him. When a human forgives you, it means they've forgiven the pain you've caused them. See, God doesn't feel pain, so pardon me, screw him. He's not in any position to forgive anybody because he never feels any pain. The only thing allowed to forgive are entities that can feel pain, because otherwise they got nothing to forgive.
Good point.
Frank, you were going to say something?
Well, I was going to introduce a different subject, if that's okay. Well, I was going to say my upbringing, being basically British, was to be self-reliant and not to depend or ask anybody to help you. But later in life, I learned about the word help. And it's kind of magic. It absolutely produces the best of results because people just can't jump quick enough to help you. And I never realized what magic there was in that word. Compassion?
I
A
bet it is.
compassion figure?
If they're going to help you, they have it. But I would think you, as a Brit, would have been listening to the Beatles, and that was one of their songs when you were growing up.
I'm
Help!
a lot
I
older
need
than that.
somebody help, not just anybody. You can't have a Jeffrey Dahmer to help you.
Fred, I was curious about what you think of all of this discussion that we had prior to Frank's comment.
I was interested in the what we got into at the end about what we mean when we say somebody has worth.
Mm.
And at some level, I think it's a sentiment. Um, uh, for me right now, I think I would evaluate worth in terms of whether our species can survive in terms of some of the things that are going on. And I think in terms of all that, that as a collective society, we're enormously hurtful ancestors, because I think we're going to mean that future generations will not be able to survive. And I think as a species, we're inherently unworthy. Uh, I think that's true. Um, but I wonder, when we've been talking about nature and nurture, there's no thing in there where we talk about free will. It's nature and nurture. And I suspect, to the extent that we really think of that, what we do is basically programmed because of who we are. And that's true for Trump and others. And that at some level, maybe everybody has the same worth because we all are acting out what has been programmed in it, to which we have no recourse. That's maybe, but as a society as a whole, maybe we have no worth. But as individuals, we can't either, because we can't get out of. I suppose our worth is that we're the same as everybody else, acting out what's been given to us that we can't do anything about.
Yeah, I devote about 20 pages of this to this very question in Chasing Davis, uh, the book I wrote. It it it's a long, involved process to go through it, and we don't have enough time. But you're raising probably the most fundamental ethical, cultural, and moral question on the books. That's the one that is the real humdinger, and there are several answers to it, but I can't go through them now. I'll have to wait for another day, or you could read the book.
Can I make a comment about you?
Sure.
I've been enormously impressed today with the way you react to each of us, taking everybody's comments seriously and reflecting on them. It's really a joy to have you in this discussion.
Well, thank you. It's the process of learning is so much more fun with people involved.
We bounce our ideas off each other and see where we are. I got something out of what you just said, Fred, that reminded me. And then you too, who's not Melissa. Tell me your name again.
Jim Luce.
Jim, thank you. Okay, Jim, thanks, Norman. Oh, Norman, you're there. I would love to hear from you as well. But anyhow, so I like the UU way that we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all creatures, whatever. That's aspirational, whether it be true or not. Whereas the Lutherans, going back to that, is the total opposite. And it did come back to me. Funny how those things happen. Okay, I'm in church. We just took communion, or we're taking communion, and this is what we would have to say. Oh Lord, our God, I admit unto thee that I admit unto thee that I am by nature sinful and unclean, and that I have sinned against thee by thought, word, and deed. Wherefore I plead for refuge to thine infinite mercy, seeking and imploring thy grace in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. We used to say that before we took communion because we were by nature sinful and unclean. We were not inherently good and worthy of this world. We had to do something. We had to give offering. We had to eat some styrofoam and not chew it, just try not to let it get stuck in the top of your mouth. And then they give you this little bitty tiny, like thing to wash it down. Can I have 5 more? It's too sweet, the wine anyhow. But yeah, what a difference. I much prefer thinking, even though it may not be true, that most all people are worthy, and not thinking that everyone is sinful and careful because they're going to do something wrong, but then they're going to ask for forgiveness and they're still going to get to heaven. I think that as a secular humanist, I'm good for nothing. I'm good because it feels good to be good. I don't expect heaven.
I think as humanists, we at a core believe that we create heaven here. Heaven is what we create here, or hell.
Joy or pain. That's exactly what we are. We're possibly in the universe the best creators of joy and pain you can imagine.
Any final comments before our hour is up? And I tell you what next month is about.
I can't wait. What's next month about?
That is the dog, Jame.
Yes, I have a picture of me there. 3 syllables, ends with an I.
Yeah, something like that.
Hachiko or something. Yeah, that's an amazing story.
Okay, next week we are going to next month we're going to attack the intriguing intersection of biocentrism, quantum physics, and consciousness, examining how emergent scientific theories challenge traditional views of reality and life centrality. We'll look into the underlying biocentrism, highlighting how life and consciousness are integral to understanding the universe based on the recent theories by scientists like Robert Lanza and quantum physicists.
Fabulous.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
So-
for
Yeah.
letting us, Bob.
For
By
joining.
the end of
Thank you
the
for
the
hosting.
discussion next month, we'll know whether we exist or not. Is that what you're saying, Bob?
Oh, heavens no.
We'll never.
Well, yeah, we're all a hologram. What the heck?
Bob, thank
Okay.
you very much for all the links you provide leading up to these discussions.
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
welcome.
excellent. Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you.
Take
Bye
care.
now.
Adios.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye. Be good.
Yeah.